There is a date that nobody talks about in any engineering classroom in America. September 3rd, 1899. On that night, in a small laboratory built on the edge of Colorado Springs, a man lit 200 light bulbs. He lit them wirelessly. He lit them from 25 miles away. He did it with no power line, no generator running at the destination, no battery pack, no solar panel. He did it using the ground beneath his feet and the air above his head. And then, 6 years later, the man who was paying his bills made one phone call, withdrew his funding, and walked away. The laboratory was eventually demolished. The patents went into the public domain. And you were never taught any of this in school. My name is Elena Ward. I've spent 8 years studying what was removed from engineering textbooks. And I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is documented history. Tesla's Colorado Springs notes are a published book. His patents are searchable on the United States Patent and Trademark Office database right now, today. The suppression of this knowledge wasn't accomplished by burning documents. It was accomplished by something far more effective: silence. Institutional silence, curriculum silence, media silence, and the silence of an industry that has collected over $4 trillion in electricity payments since 1902. Let me tell you exactly what happened, and then I'm going to show you what survived. In 1891, Tesla gave a lecture at Columbia University that made every electrical engineer in the room deeply uncomfortable. That he demonstrated that electrical energy could be transmitted through the air without wires. Not transmitted weakly, not transmitted as a curiosity, transmitted powerfully enough to light lamps, run motors, and charge capacitors. He called it the transmission of electrical energy without wires. The audience applauded. The scientific community took note. And the power industry, which at that moment was in the middle of spending hundreds of millions of dollars building the copper wire grid infrastructure that would define the next century, took very careful note of a different kind. What makes me angry about this isn't the suppression itself. What makes me angry is how casual it was. Nobody arrested Tesla. Nobody burned his lab. JP Morgan didn't send men with guns. He just stopped signing checks. That's it. That's the whole story of how free electricity died in America. A banker decided it wasn't profitable, and a century of electric bills followed. By 1899, Tesla had moved his primary laboratory to Colorado Springs. He wanted altitude, dry air, and distance from the grid infrastructure that was already being built in the cities. He wanted to test something specific, whether the Earth itself could carry electrical charge the way a wire does, not as metaphor, literally. He believed, and he proved, that the planet functions as a spherical conductor, that if you push a charge into it at one frequency, that charge travels, it propagates, it can be extracted somewhere else. On September 3rd, 1899, he ran the test, and he energized his primary transmitter, a massive Tesla coil tuned to the resonant frequency of the Earth. And he placed 200 incandescent bulbs at a receiver station 25 miles away. No wire connecting them, no battery at the receiver. The bulbs lit, all 200 of them. He documented this in his personal notes, which were published decades after his death under the title Colorado Springs Notes, 1899 to 1900. The notes are meticulous. Dates, calculations, waveforms, diagrams. This is not legend. This is engineering documentation. I want you to sit with that for a moment. 200 light bulbs, 25 miles, no wire, in 1899. Think about the last time you lost power because a tree fell on a line 3 blocks from your house. Think about your last electric bill. Think about the infrastructure of poles and wires and transformers that runs through every city, every suburb, every rural county in this country. None of that would have been necessary. None of it. If the funding hadn't stopped. Now, Tesla wasn't done. He took his Colorado Springs findings and he brought them to JP Morgan, the most powerful banker in the United States. He proposed a project called Wardenclyffe, a transmission tower on Long Island that would serve as the first node in a worldwide broadcast power network. Free electricity, available to anyone with a receiver, anywhere on Earth. Morgan funded it. Construction began in 1901. And then Morgan asked a question. The question that ended everything. He asked, Where do we put the meter? There was no meter, there was no billing mechanism. If power was broadcast like radio signals, anyone with a receiver could access it. There was no way to charge per kilowatt hour. There was no way to build a monopoly. There was no way to control who had access and who didn't. For Morgan, who had co-built the power utility infrastructure with Thomas Edison, this was not a technical problem. It was an existential threat to his entire investment portfolio. He withdrew funding in 1905. Without Morgan's backing, Tesla couldn't finish Wardenclyffe. The tower was eventually sold for scrap. Tesla spent the rest of his life largely broke, largely ignored, working in a hotel room in New York City. He died in January 1943. Within days, the U.S. government, acting under wartime security protocols, entered his room at the Hotel New Yorker and seized all of his papers, notebooks, and documents. And the FBI assigned the Office of Alien Property to manage the seizure. Many documents were classified. Some were eventually released. Some have never been made public. Now, here is the part that matters for you today. Tesla's core patents, the ones describing ground conduction, resonant frequency transmission, and the basic Earth as conductor principle, entered the public domain decades ago. They are not secret. They are not classified. They are sitting in a database that anyone with an internet connection can access. The knowledge wasn't destroyed. It was just never integrated into mainstream engineering education. It was allowed to become obscure. And obscurity, in a world where the curriculum is largely determined by institutions with financial ties to the energy industry, is almost as effective as destruction. And before I go further, and I put together a free PDF on exactly this. It's called the 1902 document they tried to delete. It covers the real Tesla timeline, the J.P. Morgan suppression in detail, and the basic Earth battery setup you can build today. Link is in the description. Grab it before we continue because what I'm about to show you builds on it. Let me explain the science in plain language because this is the part that your high school physics teacher skipped. Not because your teacher was hiding something, but because the curriculum didn't include it. And the curriculum didn't include it because the curriculum was built by institutions that are in many cases partially funded by the same energy conglomerates that benefit from your monthly electric bill. The Earth has a net negative electrical charge on its surface. And this is not disputed physics. It is the basis of lightning. Lightning is the atmosphere discharging against a negatively charged Earth. The magnitude of this charge is estimated at approximately 500,000 coulombs distributed across the planet's surface. Above the Earth, extending from roughly 60 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers altitude, is the ionosphere, a layer of plasma carrying a strong positive charge. Between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, there is a potential difference of approximately 300,000 volts. This is called the global atmospheric electric circuit, and it has been documented in mainstream atmospheric science since the early 20th century. Tesla understood this. His experiments in Colorado Springs were, at their core, experiments in how to tap this circuit, how to extract usable current from a system that is continuously recharged by solar radiation, lightning, and geomagnetic activity. He wasn't inventing energy from nothing. He was proposing to harvest energy from a planetary-scale system that generates and renews itself continuously, for free, without burning anything, without any human maintenance. The reason this was never developed further is not that it doesn't work. The reason is that it cannot be metered. It cannot be owned. It cannot be controlled. It produces no revenue for an intermediary. And an energy industry built on the premise of metered, billed, monopoly-controlled power distribution had every incentive to ensure this approach remained a historical footnote. What makes me most frustrated, and I say this after 8 years of research, is that the science is not complicated. The basic Earth battery principle, which is one of the most accessible derivations of Tesla's work, requires materials that cost less than $5 at any hardware store. I'm going to walk you through it. An Earth battery is a simple electrochemical cell that extracts voltage from the soil using two dissimilar metals. The principle was documented as early as 1840 by British inventor John Dancer and was later refined by American inventor Nathan Stubblefield in the 1890s, a man who demonstrated before Tesla's Wardenclyffe project. that he could transmit voice signals and power small devices using only stakes in the ground. Stubblefield's work was dismissed, his patents largely ignored, and he died in poverty in 1928. The chemistry is straightforward. When you insert a copper rod and a zinc rod into moist soil and connect them through an external circuit, a galvanic reaction occurs. Soil contains dissolved salts, minerals, and organic acids that function as an electrolyte. The copper acts as the cathode, the zinc as the anode. Electrons flow from the zinc through the external circuit to the copper. Voltage generated per cell is approximately 0.3 to 0.9 volts depending on soil composition, moisture content, and mineral density. Multiple cells connected in series multiply the voltage. Multiple cells connected in parallel multiply the current. A simple array of 12 cells connected in the correct configuration can generate between 4 and 11 volts, enough to charge a phone, power LED lighting, run a small radio, or continuously charge a capacitor bank for intermittent higher demand applications. The materials required: copper pipe or copper rod, approximately 12 inches per cell. Galvanized zinc pipe or zinc rod, approximately 12 inches per cell. Insulated wire, copper, minimum 22 gauge. A multimeter to measure output. Optional, a voltage amplifier circuit to boost and regulate the output for practical use. Installation is straightforward. Select a location with consistently moist soil, near a garden, near a water source, or at a depth of 18 to 24 inches, where soil retains moisture year-round in most climates. Insert the copper and zinc rods approximately 8 to 10 inches apart. Connect them in series using insulated wire. Positive terminal of cell 1 to negative terminal of cell 2, and so on. Measure your output with the multimeter. In good soil conditions, you will see voltage immediately. In dry conditions, the cells can be moistened manually or connected at deeper, moister soil layers. This is not a metaphor. This is not a thought experiment. This is electrochemistry that has been documented for over 180 years. The reason it isn't powering your home is scale, not principle. The reason scale was never developed is funding. The reason funding was never directed here is that the metered power industry had no interest in developing an unmeasurable energy source. The economic incentive ran entirely in the opposite direction. Here is something I want you to think about. In 2024, the average American household paid $1,650 per year in electricity costs. That's $137 per month. That's $137 every month for a service that, in principle, 180-year-old technology built from materials costing less than $10 could partially replace. Now, I am not telling you that an earth battery array will replace your entire electrical load. Not today. Not without significant engineering development. What I'm telling you is that the basic principle works, has always worked, and was deliberately kept at the margins by an industry with a financial interest in keeping it there. Let me give you the second layer, because the earth battery is the most accessible entry point. But it's not where Tesla's work ended, not even close. Tesla's actual vision, the Wardenclyffe vision, was atmospheric and ground resonance power transmission. And in 2025, elements of this vision are being actively researched, quietly, in laboratories that don't publicize their funding sources. Schumann resonance frequencies, the electromagnetic resonances of the Earth ionosphere cavity, first described by German physicist Winfried Otto Schumann in 1952, operate at approximately 7.83 Hz and its harmonics. These frequencies are continuously present in the global atmospheric electric circuit. They are measurable anywhere on Earth with the right equipment. Tesla had identified these frequencies empirically in 1899, decades before Schumann formalized them. Modern researchers have demonstrated small-scale energy extraction from Schumann resonances using tuned antenna arrays. The power densities are low by conventional standards, but they are real, measurable, and continuous. The technology exists to amplify and store this energy using modern capacitor banks and voltage conditioning circuits that Tesla never had access to. The gap between his 1902 vision and current technical capability is much smaller than the energy industry would prefer you to believe. I spent 3 years trying to find the document that changed my understanding of all of this. It wasn't a classified file, it wasn't a leaked memo. It was a 1917 article in the journal Electrical Experimenter, in which Tesla himself described in plain language that Wardenclyffe was designed not just as a communication tower, but as a power broadcast station. He wrote with characteristic directness that the tower would make it possible for a businessman in New York to dictate instructions and have them instantly appear in type at his office in London or elsewhere. He will be able to call up from his desk and talk to any telephone subscriber on the globe, actually without any change whatever in the existing equipment. An inexpensive receiver, not bigger than a watch, will enable him to listen anywhere on land or sea to a speech delivered or music played in some other place, however distant. These examples are cited merely to give an idea of the possibilities of this great scientific departure, which annihilates distance. That's Tesla describing the internet, wireless communication, and broadcast power. In 1917, the technology was real, the vision was complete, and a banker decided it wasn't monetizable. Now let me address the objection that I know some of you are already formulating. You're thinking, if this was real, why didn't someone else build it? Why didn't another inventor, another country, another corporation pick up where Tesla left off? When the answer is more complex than a single conspiracy. It involves a combination of factors: patent capture, curriculum exclusion, funding redirection, and the simple economic reality that the metered power grid had, by 1920, already been built. The infrastructure existed. The capital had been deployed. The regulatory frameworks had been written. The utilities had been incorporated. Building a competing broadcast power system would have required not just new technology, but the dismantling of a $100 billion capital structure. Nobody with the resources to do it had any incentive to, and nobody without the resources could. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a description of how capital allocation works. Investment flows toward returns. Free power has no return for an intermediary. Therefore, that investment did not flow toward free power. The knowledge that existed in 1902 was not destroyed. It was simply left to sit in patent archives and engineering footnotes while the metered grid expanded to cover the entire planet and collected its first 100 years of billing. The second reason is slightly more subtle. Tesla's work sits at the intersection of electrical engineering, atmospheric physics, and geochemistry, a combination that doesn't map cleanly onto any single academic department. Earth battery research falls into electrochemistry. Atmospheric energy extraction falls into atmospheric physics. Ground resonance transmission falls into electrical engineering and geophysics. Because the work doesn't fit a single disciplinary box, it falls through the cracks of academic funding and curriculum development. It has no department. It has no budget line. It has no faculty champion. And so it doesn't exist in the mainstream, not because it was buried, but because it was simply never picked up. I've had engineers tell me that Earth batteries don't produce enough power to be useful, and technically at small scale, they're right. A single copper-zinc cell generates less than 1 volt. But that's like saying a single solar cell is useless. It is, at scale. The power of both technologies lies in arrays, in series parallel configurations, in storage and regulation. The difference is that solar technology received 50 years of sustained research investment and manufacturing development. Earth battery technology received almost none. We are comparing a technology that had billions of dollars of development investment against one that had essentially zero. And we're using the output comparison to conclude that one works and one doesn't. That's not a scientific conclusion. That's a funding conclusion disguised as a scientific one. Let me give you a practical framework for thinking about what's actually achievable today with existing technology and modest investment. A well-designed Earth battery array of 50 cells, properly installed in moist soil with a modern voltage conditioning circuit, and a 12-volt lithium storage bank can generate and store approximately 5 to 15 watt-hours per day in good soil conditions. That's enough to power LED lighting for several rooms for multiple hours per evening, a low-power radio or communications device continuously, phone and small device charging, a low-draw security system. It will not run your air conditioner. It will not power an electric vehicle, but it will meaningfully reduce your grid dependency. And it will do it with materials that cost under $50 total, using a 180-year-old principle that has never required improvement, only scale. The atmospheric harvester is the next tier. A basic atmospheric static electricity collector, a Kelvin water dropper, or an elevated antenna array connected through a grounding system, and a high-voltage rectifier can supplement an earth battery system and provide additional charging current during high atmospheric charge periods, particularly before storms, at high altitude or in low humidity desert climates. The voltages involved are higher, potentially in the hundreds of volts, so proper insulation and safety practices are mandatory. But the components are available. More the science is documented. The implementation is achievable by anyone with basic electrical safety knowledge and a weekend. Tesla's own notes from Colorado Springs describe a primitive version of this system, an elevated antenna connected through a capacitor to a ground stake with a discharge circuit tapped in between. He described it as extracting charge from the ambient medium. In 1899, with materials available in 1899, with materials available today at any electronics supplier for under $20. What I want you to understand is that the gap between this exists in a historical notebook and this is running in my backyard is smaller than the energy industry has any interest in you knowing. The patents are public. The science is documented. The materials are available. The only thing missing is the cultural permission to take it seriously. And that cultural permission was withdrawn by the same forces that withdrew Tesla's funding in 1905. There is a figure in this story that most people don't know. His name is Thomas Henry Moray. In the 1920s and 1930s, Moray developed a device he called the radiant energy device, a solid-state receiver that he claimed extracted energy from the ambient electromagnetic environment, including cosmic radiation and ground-based fields. He demonstrated the device repeatedly to engineers, scientists, and government officials. His device reportedly powered a 35-watt light bank continuously without any external power connection. It was tested, witnessed, documented. He applied for patents. The United States Patent Office rejected his applications repeatedly and stating that the device violated conservation of energy. He was shot at. His lab was broken into. His device was eventually destroyed in his laboratory under disputed circumstances. He died in 1974, still claiming his device had worked. I am not telling you Moray's device worked. I am telling you the pattern of what happens to people who work in this space. Dismissal, then obstruction, then destruction. Whether by intent or by economic gravity, the pattern is consistent across a century. Let me tell you about Nathan Stubblefield one more time, because he deserves more than a footnote. Stubblefield was a Kentucky farmer and amateur inventor who in 1892 demonstrated wireless voice transmission to his neighbors. 11 years before Marconi's famous transatlantic transmission, which is credited as the invention of radio. He used ground conduction, not radio waves, to transmit. He powered his system using earth batteries he had designed himself. He held public demonstrations. He attracted press coverage. He was offered investment. He declined, reportedly because he didn't trust investors. He lived in increasing isolation, grew his own food, built his own tools, and died of starvation alone in his cabin in 1928. His inventions unpatented and unrecognized. The establishment narrative credits Marconi with radio. Tesla disputed this. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Tesla's favor in 1943, shortly after Tesla's death, that Tesla's patents predated and superseded Marconi's. Stubblefield is barely a footnote. The history of suppressed energy technology is, at its core, a history of what happens when an invention cannot generate revenue for a financier. Let me now take you to 2025, because this is not purely a story of the past. In 2023, a team at MIT published research on ambient electromagnetic energy harvesting using rectenna arrays, antenna rectifier combinations that convert ambient radio frequency energy, including Wi-Fi and cellular signals, into usable DC current. The power densities demonstrated were small, on the order of microwatts per square centimeter, but the principle was validated, published, and reproducible. What the MIT team was demonstrating: with 21st century metamaterials and nanofabrication, was functionally equivalent to what Tesla described with steel towers and copper wire in 1899. The principle has not changed. The understanding has not changed. The materials have improved enormously, but the direction of research investment has not changed. It still flows toward technologies that can be metered, billed, and monopolized. The MIT paper was celebrated as a breakthrough in the academic community. It received modest science press coverage. It did not receive a billion-dollar development grant from a utility company. It received what academic research receives when it threatens no incumbent: polite acknowledgement and minimal follow-through. Meanwhile, the average American household paid $1,650 for electricity in 2024. The average global electricity bill is rising at approximately 4% annually. The global atmospheric electric circuit continues to generate and renew itself around the clock, every day for free, as it has for the entire history of the Earth. I want to give you a clear picture of where the practical technology stands today and what you can realistically build. Not because I'm trying to replace your power company with a YouTube tutorial, but because understanding the real capability of these methods is the beginning of energy independence. And energy independence is ultimately a political act. It is a refusal to participate in a 100-year billing arrangement that was designed to be inescapable. The Earth Battery Array, as described earlier, is your first step. It is the most reliable, the most documented, and the most achievable. It requires no specialized knowledge, no dangerous voltages, no components that are hard to source. It is pure applied electrochemistry, and it works every time. The atmospheric harvester is your second step. More complex, requires greater safety awareness, but significantly higher potential output, particularly in the right geographic and meteorological conditions. Tesla's own Colorado Springs location was chosen specifically because the atmospheric electrical conditions there are exceptional. High altitude, low humidity, frequent electrical storm activity. Most people don't live in conditions that optimal, but even in temperate climates, an elevated atmospheric antenna array can produce supplementary charging current for a storage bank. The Schumann resonance receiver is the frontier. This is where the technology becomes genuinely experimental. Tuning a receiver to 7.83 Hz requires specialized inductor-capacitor circuits, precision frequency matching, and low-noise amplification stages that are beyond basic electronics. But the components are all commercially available. The theory is documented in mainstream atmospheric physics literature, and the research that exists, while limited, suggests that the potential is real. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm asking you to look at the patents. I'm asking you to look at the Colorado Springs notes. I'm asking you to look at the atmospheric physics literature on the global electric circuit. I'm asking you to look at the history of who funded what and why. And then I'm asking you to build a 12-cell Earth battery in your backyard for less than the cost of a dinner and measure the voltage yourself. Because here is what happens when you measure it yourself. You stop asking whether it works, and you start asking why you were never taught this. I have been asked many times whether I'm afraid. Whether publishing this research, running this channel, I'm naming these names creates any personal risk. My honest answer is no. Not because there isn't a history of suppression in this field. There clearly is. But because the most effective suppression isn't violence. It's irrelevance. The way you control knowledge in the 21st century isn't by burning books. It's by making sure the books never appear in search results, by making sure the curriculum never includes the subject, by making sure the subject is associated culturally with conspiracy theorists and crackpots, so that any serious researcher who approaches it has to spend the first 20 minutes of every conversation defending the legitimacy of the question before they can even ask it. That's what I spend my time fighting, not men in dark suits. The assumption that this subject is unserious. The assumption that if it were real, you would have heard about it by now. As if the fact that you haven't heard about something is proof that it doesn't exist, rather than proof that the information environment you live in is controlled by interests that prefer you to remain ignorant of it. You have heard about it now. Let me give you the component list one more time, clearly and completely. for the 12-cell Earth battery array that will generate measurable voltage from your soil today. Materials: 12 copper pipes, 3/4-inch diameter, 12 inches long. Available at any hardware store, approximately $1.50 each. 12 zinc-coated galvanized pipes or zinc rods, same dimensions. Approximately $1 each. Insulated copper wire, 22 AWG minimum, approximately 30 feet. Approximately $5. One digital multimeter, approximately $12 if you don't already own one. Optional, one LM2 596 buck converter module for voltage regulation, approximately $2 on any electronics marketplace. Optional, one lithium battery pack with charge controller, 3.7 volts, 2,000 to 5,000 milliampere hours, approximately $8 to $15. Total cost, under $45 with storage, under $25 for basic demonstration. Installation process, select your installation site. Moist soil, shaded if possible, access to consistent moisture. Mark 12 pairs of locations, each pair approximately 8 to 10 inches apart, pairs spaced 12 to 18 inches from each other in a row. Drive copper rod and zinc rod into each pair location to a depth of 10 to 12 inches. Leave 1 to 2 inches of each rod above the soil surface. Connect the positive terminal, the copper rod, of the first pair to the negative terminal, the zinc rod, of the second pair. Continue in series through all 12 pairs, the free positive terminal at the beginning of the chain and the free negative terminal at the end of the chain are your output leads. Connect these to your multimeter. In moist, mineral-rich soil, you should read between 4 and 11 volts. Connect to a buck converter, set output to 5 volts, and you have a USB-compatible power source from your backyard. This is not science fiction. This is 180-year-old electrochemistry. This is the kind of thing that used to be in Popular Science magazine in 1952, before the content of mainstream science publishing drifted almost entirely toward professional and consumer technology topics that don't threaten incumbent industry revenue. I want to close with something that Tesla himself wrote in 1900 in Century magazine, in an article titled "The Problem of Increasing Human Energy." He wrote in reference to his proposed planetary power system, "Throughout space there is energy. Is this energy static or kinetic? If static, our hopes are in vain. If kinetic, and this we know it is for certain, then it is a mere question of time when men will succeed in attaching their machinery to the very wheelwork of nature." He was right that it is kinetic. The global atmospheric electric circuit is kinetic. It is continuously driven by solar radiation, by lightning, by geomagnetic activity. It is the wheelwork of nature. The question of when men will succeed in attaching their machinery to it was answered in small-scale demonstrations in 1899. The question of when that success will be broadly implemented is not a technical question. It never has been. It is a political and economic question. And the answer will be determined by how many people decide to stop waiting for the industry to give them permission and start building in their backyard instead. You now know more about the suppressed history of free electricity than most engineers walking out of a 4-year program today. That knowledge is yours. Nobody can withdraw the funding on what you already understand. The Free Power Files Vault has every method I've documented, all 12 guides, every component list, every step-by-step setup, every historical source. It's one price, no subscription. It's everything I spent 8 years compiling, organized so that anyone can use it, starting this week. The link is in the description. Don't let another month pass paying for something that should have been free since 1902.